When two kids are turned away just for stepping into a car dealership, their father decides to speak up. A surprising confrontation forces the dealership to change its perspective. The afternoon sunlight bathed the streets of Chino Hills, California in gold, a quiet town in the southern stretch of Los Angeles where everything seemed to slow down whenever the summer heat crept between the cracks of brick sidewalks. A dry breeze swept lightly through the neat curls of 17-year-old Jalen Carter as he walked slowly with his 15-year-old sister, Madison, across the parking lot of Crestline Motors. Sweat soaked the back of his gray athletic shirt, but his eyes still burned bright, like the sun casting long shadows behind him. "I never said we were buying a car today," Jalen said, adjusting the strap of his gym bag. "But, I just wanted to check out a few used ones. Get inspired before the birthday." Madison laughed, flipping her long braids over her shoulder. "You really think Dad's going to let you drive a two-door coupe to school? Keep dreaming." Jalen chuckled, but didn't slow down. "Let me dream." Crestline Motors looked sleek and upscale, with a neat row of gleaming silver sedans lined under faded flag streamers. The automatic glass doors shimmered in the evening light, and the two of them stepped in with quiet excitement. Not to cause trouble, but simply to dream for a while. The air inside was cold, slicing through the outside heat like a thin blade. A middle-aged man in a pale blue dress shirt looked up from behind the front desk. His eyes stopped on Jalen first, then flicked to Madison. They were dressed casually, but clean, Jalen in workout gear, Madison in a simple white cotton dress and clean white sneakers. Nothing unusual, nothing to raise concern. But the man stood up abruptly, as if something were suddenly wrong. "How can I help you too?" he asked, voice clipped, not warm. Jalen, always polite, stepped forward. We just want to look at some of the used cars. My birthday is coming up. Do you have an appointment?" The man cut in, stepping closer, his eyes flicking toward a colleague across the showroom. Jalen shook his head. "No, we don't allow minors in the showroom without an adult," the man said, his tone now colder than before. "Company policy." Madison tightened the strap of her bag. Jalen met the man's eyes. Then he nodded. "All right, we'll go." And they left. No arguing. No anger. Just two teens walking back into the fading sunlight, carrying something heavier than disappointment. Not because a dream had been denied, but because they had been made to feel invisible. The SUV rolled down the gentle hills of Chino Hills, golden light spilling across rows of trees and red-tiled rooftops. No one spoke the entire ride home. Jalen sat gazing out the window, chin resting on his hand, his eyes void of the excitement he had carried leaving practice. Madison glanced over at her brother now and then, about to speak, but stopped each time. She knew that look, that distant, quiet stare, not from exhaustion, but from restraint. It wasn't simple sadness. It was the kind of hurt that words couldn't quite carry. "You're not going to tell Dad, are you?" Madison asked softly. Jalen didn't answer right away. He rotated the rubber bracelet on his wrist, a habit whenever his mind got tangled. "I don't know," he whispered. "I'm not even sure what to call it. It's not like they yelled at us. They just didn't want us there." Madison leaned back in her seat, eyes tracing the ceiling. "To me, it felt like getting kicked out just for breathing." They said nothing more. They didn't need to. That feeling had already settled over them like the heat on their skin, impossible to brush off. The black SUV rolled to a quiet stop in front of a white estate, what most people refer to simply as Mr. Carter's house when speaking of the Western Hills. It wasn't flashy, but carried a kind of quiet grandeur. The iron gate slid open on cue, revealing a granite stone driveway shaded by old oak and orange trees. Jalen and Madison stepped through the side entrance. The air inside was cool, filled with familiar scent of sandalwood and soft soap. In the kitchen, Miss Rachel, the elderly housekeeper, was stacking folded towels on the shelf. "You two are back already?" she asked with a warm smile. "Had fun." "It was fine," Madison replied quietly. Jalen said nothing, setting down his bag and walking past the living room. "Jalen." A deep voice came from down the hallway. It was their father, Franklin Carter, stepping out of his office, an iPad in hand. Why are you two home so early? Jalen turned around, lips pressed tight. Mr. Carter's eyes swept over both of them, reading something unspoken in his son's face. What happened? He asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it held the quiet strength of velvet wrapped around steel. Madison let out a slow breath. Jalen met his father's gaze head-on. A man at the dealership said, "We weren't allowed in the showroom without an adult," Jalen said carefully. He said, "It wasn't a place for us to just wander around." The room fell still. Franklin placed the iPad down on the table and folded his arms. "And what did you do?" Jalen swallowed hard. "We left. Didn't want to make a scene." Mr. Carter's gaze seemed to deepen. He wasn't angry, but he was fully awake. "You did the right thing," Mr. Carter said, then pulled out a chair for each of his children. "But I need you both to understand something. Silence isn't always noble. Sometimes, if you don't speak up, people think they have the right to do it again, then again and again." Jalen looked up, brows furrowed. "So, what are you going to do?" Mr. Carter didn't answer right away. He just smiled, a slow, deliberate smile, and pulled his phone from his breast pocket. "Tomorrow, I have a conversation that needs to happen." The next morning, Arizona's sunlight streamed through the second-story windows of the Carter estate, casting golden stripes across the floor. Jalen had been awake for a while, staring up at the ceiling. The weight from the day before still sat heavy in his chest. Not quite anger, but a confusing kind of disquiet. From downstairs, he could hear Madison on the phone, her voice low but clear. "Yeah, for real. We just walked in to look at some cars, and they kicked us out. But Dad, yeah, he's about to do something. But don't post anything on TikTok yet. At least not yet." When Jalen came down to the kitchen, Mr. Carter was already dressed in a dark blazer, crisp white shirt, and a silver watch that glinted in the morning light. Coffee dripped steadily into a ceramic mug. The air in the house felt different. Not tense exactly, but like a stage being set. "Where are you going?" Jalen asked, eyeing his father's polished appearance. "To meet a few people," he replied, pouring his coffee as if preparing for a routine business meeting. "Where?" "Crestline Motors Auto Gallery," Mr. Carter said without blinking. Jalen's eyes widened. "You're going to talk to them?" Mr. Carter sipped his coffee. "Talk? No. I'm going to teach them a lesson without raising my voice." Moments later, the black Rolls-Royce Phantom rolled out through the gates. Madison and Jalen stood on the front steps, watching with a strange blend of nervousness and anticipation. At Crestline Motors Auto Gallery, the usual morning rhythm was already thrown off by 8:47 a.m. A Rolls-Royce Phantom glided into the lot, its daytime lights casting a gleam off the mirror-like black finish. The front receptionist nearly choked on her latte when she saw the vehicle pull up directly in front of the main entrance, blocking the usual path reserved for VIP clientele. Derek, the assistant sales manager with gel-slicked hair, was leaning against the front counter, scrolling through TikTok, when he sprang to his feet at the sight of the car door swinging open. A tall, broad-shouldered man with warm brown skin stepped out of the vehicle, dressed in a dark tailored suit and gleaming Italian leather shoes. He didn't need a badge. The way he moved, deliberate, precise, said everything. This was a man who didn't require an introduction. Derek swallowed hard, then stammered. "Gee, good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" The man said plainly, "I want to speak with the manager." Right then, Kyle, the showroom manager, heavy-set and already flushed, stepped out of his office. His prepackaged smile hadn't even fully formed before his eyes landed on the slim, metallic business card being handed to him. Franklin Carter, founder and CEO of TNS Global. Kyle froze like he'd been shocked. Mr. Carter, I didn't know you were coming today." "No one did, and I didn't come here to be welcomed," Franklin said evenly. "I came to ask why my son and daughter were turned away yesterday, just because they wore athletic clothes and walked in with hope." A small group of employees stood silently near the information desk, pretending to clean but unable to tear their eyes away from the scene that felt like a movie playing out in real time. They did nothing wrong. They entered this place with respect, something your people couldn't return. Kyle fumbled, gesturing toward the conference room. Maybe we can speak in private? No need for privacy, Franklin said, shaking his head. If the wrongdoing was public, then the lesson should be public too. Just then, a customer browsing vehicles outside began live streaming to Facebook. The video, less than 5 minutes in, was already spreading fast. The first comment popped up. The kids, Dad handling it cool and classy. Derek stood still, praying he could somehow vanish. As for Franklin, he was only getting started. This won't take long, Franklin Carter said, his voice steady and low, like a professor leading a seminar on ethics more than a man confronting a car dealership. The entire Crestline Motors auto gallery seemed to hold its breath. My children don't need an apology, but I need everyone here to remember one thing. They are not invisible. Derek, still try not to spill his Americano, glanced at Kyle, silently begging for some kind of lifeline. But Kyle, pale as plaster, just stood frozen, sweat soaking to the collar of his sky-blue shirt. At that moment, a voice called out from the front entrance. Is that Mr. Carter? This clip is already trending on Twitter. A college student from ASU, hair bleached platinum and wearing a t-shirt that read "Justice is not optional," was live streaming with her phone. Next to her stood a friend holding a purple microphone with the KXME News 5 logo, the local TV station. Franklin simply raised an eyebrow, expression unreadable. Looks like the world's watching, he said, turning back to Kyle. I didn't call the press, but people tend to gather around truth. And the truth is, you didn't treat my children based on our actions, but on the bias you carried in your first glance. Kyle tried to steady his voice, struggling to maintain a professional tone. We'll need to review procedures. It could have been a misunderstanding. Don't misunderstand me, Franklin interrupted, his tone still even but now carrying an unmistakable chill. I didn't come here to hear adjustments. I came to reteach those who forgot that kindness requires no conditions. At that very moment, the revolving door spun open again. A woman walked in holding 2 warm donuts in a paper box and exclaimed, "No way. This man handled it better than half the dad revenge clips on TikTok." A light ripple of laughter echoed in the corner. Not mockery, just the undeniable recognition of truth laid bare. Franklin said no more. He turned and walked out, passing by the growing crowd gathered at the front glass doors, leaving behind a showroom stripped of illusion, without ever needing to raise his voice. Less than 24 hours after that quiet morning at the dealership, the video of Franklin Carter had passed 2 million views on X, formerly Twitter. A short clip, just 1 minute and 47 seconds, but its impact swept through Arizona like a summer monsoon. He didn't yell. He didn't slam anything. He just stood there and somehow made the whole room feel small. Read one of the top comments, punctuated with a fire emoji. Fire. Back at home, Madison sat on the living room couch hugging a pillow, eyes locked on her iPad screen. "Bro, it's on TikTok now," she said, nudging Jalen with her elbow. He sat next to her, quietly watching the video blow up. He scrolled to a comment that read, "Who needs the Avengers when your dad's built like this?" Jalen let out a laugh. The first real one since a full day of texts and notifications. People acting like he snapped and deleted the whole dealership, he chuckled. Madison nodded. "I mean, he kind of did. Have you seen the audio dupes yet?" Someone turned his speech into a rap remix. She tapped play. "You don't need to be loud to stand proud." Jalen burst out laughing. "Can't believe Dad's voice fits a trap beat." Madison howled. "He doesn't even raise his voice. He just drops the mic." It wasn't just a talk. It was a statement. And all of Tempe was starting to notice. At that moment, Franklin walked in from the backyard, holding 2 glasses of fresh-squeezed orange juice. "What's so funny?" he asked, tilting his head. Madison held up the iPad. "Dad, you're viral. People are calling you the CEO of clapbacks." Franklin gave a small smirk, not sure if that's a compliment or a warning. Jalen reached out to take the glass of juice, his eyes still fixed on the video where his dad was walking out of the showroom, edited like a slow-motion scene from an action movie. A bold caption flashed on screen. He didn't walk out. He shut the door with his eyes. Franklin shook his head. People nowadays write better screenplays than Hollywood. Madison added, some news network wants to interview you. They said they want to hear the thoughts of a calm father who shook the system. Franklin sighed, leaning back against the kitchen counter. All I wanted was for my kids to be treated with respect. Didn't think I'd end up going viral. Jalen smirked. Welcome to Gen Z, Dad. On Wednesday morning, when Franklin Carter stepped into the boardroom at TNS Global, for members of the investment council were already seated. 3 men in charcoal suits and 1 woman with her laptop open, her expression more serious than usual. Today, it's not just your kids, it's the whole country that knows your face, came a voice from the far end of the table. It was Valerie Kim, the firm's communications advisor. Franklin sat down, calmly poured a glass of water from the carafe, as if the viral video with millions of views was just a passing morning weather report. I don't need an audience, he said. I just need my children to know they're protected. Mark Davison, a venture partner out of San Francisco, leaned forward. Franklin, I've got to ask, are you planning any kind of follow-up? I mean, let's be honest. Right now, you're holding the biggest microphone on social media. Franklin smiled slightly. There's nothing more to say. The story already told itself. Valerie nodded in agreement, but then turned her laptop around to face him. Still, you should see this. On the screen was the latest viral clip, edited like a superhero movie trailer. Slow motion shots, dramatic music, sound bites from Franklin's speech at the dealership, cut together with screenshots of news headlines, tweets, and the highlight quote. He didn't shout. He shook the ground. My niece at Berkeley thought it was a teaser for a new Netflix series, Valerie said. And if there's a part 2, Mark added, half joking, it'll probably include someone losing their job. Laughter rippled through the room. Franklin just shook his head. I didn't craft a narrative. I simply stood up. Right then, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number appeared. You didn't just teach your children. You made an entire generation reflect. Franklin set the phone down, his gaze drifting out the wide window toward Camelback Mountain. Sunlight poured through the glass in golden waves. Maybe this time, he said, silence isn't an option anymore. The room softened. It was no longer just a strategy session. It was a moment, a message finding its way, a father, an action, a consequence. But more than anything, it was an awakening, and it wasn't over. That afternoon, as Derek Holton, assistant sales manager at Crestline Motors Auto Gallery, tried to finish his iced coffee without breaking into a sweat, he had no idea a fast-moving storm was headed his way. A sleek black SUV cruised past the dealership's front gate and parked squarely in front of the main entrance, paying no attention to the signs that read VIP parking or appointment-only clients. Out stepped a woman in her early 30s, hair swept up in a high bun, wearing a cream-colored power suit and oversized sunglasses. She walked like she was on a red carpet, phone tucked between her cheek and shoulder, the other hand pulling a leather suitcase behind her. Has he been notified yet? She said into the phone, then turned to the receptionist. Excuse me, who's the manager here? Please hold on a moment, the receptionist stammered. She cut in. No need. I'm the senior executive assistant at TNS Global. Derek had just stepped out of his office when he froze at the sight of her. I'm sorry, you are? Jessica Jerome. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Franklin Carter. Derek's face drained a color, like someone who just swallowed a mouthful of ice. She continued, calm as if ordering a latte. We're currently in contact with 2 journalists, one from the Arizona Republic and another from KXME5. They're looking for a balanced story, so I believe transparent cooperation would be preferable to a delayed press statement. She didn't ask to speak with management. She handed the receptionist a sealed legal document and requested it be delivered directly to the dealership chain's owner. Inside was an official notification. TNS Global was terminating its $2 million advertising partnership with the Crestline Motors branch. The letter also stated that the company was reviewing its full roster of suppliers, including the entire Crestline showroom chain. No need for a response, Jerome said before turning to leave. We're only here to make sure they understand the price of disrespect. The next morning, Arizona sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains, waking Jalen and Madison. News of the dealership incident had spread rapidly, and today, the Carter family was bracing for the aftermath. When the three of them stepped into the living room, they saw a group of reporters and journalists gathered outside the front gate. Franklin took a deep breath, looking at his son and daughter. "Today's going to be a long day," he said, his voice calm but weighty. Jalen felt his heartbeat speed up. He had never been the center of attention like this before. Madison placed a hand on her brother's shoulder, quietly lending him strength. Franklin opened the door and stepped outside with composed confidence. He walked toward the crowd of reporters and held up a hand for silence. "I know you all have questions," he began, voice clear and steady. "First, I want to thank you for taking interest in what happened." A reporter raised a mic toward him. "Mr. Carter, could you share your thoughts on how the dealership treated your children?" Franklin nodded. "I'm disappointed, but not surprised. Situations like this aren't rare. What matters is how we respond and what we choose to learn from them." Jalen and Madison stood beside their father, feeling the gravity of the moment. Jalen recalled the feeling of being dismissed at the dealership, and now he understood silence wasn't always the answer. Another reporter asked, "What do you hope to see from the car dealership after this incident?" Franklin looked straight into the camera. "I'm not looking for revenge or blame. I hope they and all of us take a moment to reflect on how we treat one another, not based on bias or appearance." After the press conference, the Carter family returned inside. Franklin placed a hand on Jalen's shoulder. "Do you see now the power of standing up for what's right? Sometimes silence is golden, but there are moments when we must speak." Jalen nodded, taking in the weight of that lesson. Madison smiled, knowing that their family had just weathered a powerful storm, and they were stronger because of it. That night, at the Carter home, Jalen didn't say much. He sat at the dinner table, quietly spinning a fork in his hand, still lost in thoughts from the day before. Madison pulled out a chair beside him, gently set her phone down, and slid a cup of hot cocoa his way. Franklin entered the room holding a small black velvet box, which he placed gently on the table in front of his son. "Tomorrow's your birthday," he said. "I don't believe in buying cars based on emotion, but today I realize sometimes a dream deserves to be held on to harder than ever." Jalen opened the box. Inside was a car key tagged, "Left garage." He looked up, eyes misty. "Did you do this because of how I was treated?" Franklin shook his head, voice warm and steady. "No, I did it because you walked away from that place with your head held high, and because you didn't forget who you are." Madison chuckled and tapped his arm. "But just so you know, if you scratch that car, I'm telling everyone at school." Jalen let out a soft laugh, but then he grew quiet again, eyes drifting out toward the lawn. "Part of me still feels ashamed," he said. "Not because of what happened at the dealership, but because I didn't say anything. I just stood there." Madison tilted her head. "You did the right thing. Standing up doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes it means knowing when to step back so you can prepare for the right strike." Franklin had been sitting nearby, quietly listening to his children speak. The night breeze stirred through the orange trees in the backyard. "You know," Franklin began, "when I was young, I got turned down from 3 job interviews just because of my last name. No one ever said it out loud, but I knew, and I didn't react at the time. But I never forgot." Jalen turned to look at him. "And it was moments like that," Franklin continued, "that taught me how to build something they couldn't ignore. You're not weak because you stayed quiet, but you need to know when to speak, and when you do, speak with your dignity." Madison chimed in, half joking, half serious. "So does that mean next time I can yell?" Franklin burst into laughter. "As long as you know what you're yelling for, and that it's something worth protecting." He sat down, his gaze settling on both of them, then added, "Sometimes you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You just need to stand firm, be clear, and never let anyone else write your story for you." Madison spoke softly. "I think the whole city saw that." Franklin smiled gently. "Maybe, but I didn't do this for attention. I did it for the next kids who walk into that dealership. And next time, maybe no one will know their last name. But at the very least, the person behind the counter will remember and act differently. Jalen tightened his grip on the key. I get it now. I'm not just driving a car. I'm carrying a message. Franklin nodded. Exactly. And you'll pass it on. Not with your voice, but through the way you live. The next morning, sunlight had already stretched high across the sky. The new car gleamed under the carport, but the real light was what had begun to grow within them. A deeper sense of worth, of dignity, and of silence more powerful than any shout.